This is the third video of the series about Pi-hole and VLANs. In the first video, I talked about if you install Pi-hole in a virtual machine or physical computer, how you can deal with multiple VLANs. The second one, Pi-hole in Proxmox container. This video is about if you install Pi-hole in a Synology Docker. In this video, we will talk about if you only have one network interface in Synology, you use it to only support one network in your Docker. What's the issue to support VLAN? Then we will see if you change a setting in Pi-hole, then you can manipulate the firewall rules to support multiple VLANs. The third part is the approach I prefer. So you first introduce multiple interfaces in Synology by using one physical interface. Then in Docker, you utilize these new interfaces to define multiple networks. So in this way, you don't need to change anything in firewall rules. You don't need to change anything in Pi-hole. You automatically support multiple VLANs. Okay, let's get started. I use UniFi gateways to support multiple VLANs. As you can see in UniFi network controller for network setting, I have 3 networks or VLANs defined: the default network, VLAN 10, and the VLAN 20. At this moment, I do not have any firewall rules to prevent the communications among the 3 VLANs. Then let's start with the simplest scenario. I am going to use Docker Compose to use Macvlan to define the network and the Pi-hole Docker. In this Docker document, you can see Docker Engine support multiple drivers when it comes to networking. For example, the most popular bridge host, right? But in this video, I'm only going to use Macvlan to install Pi-hole. In this video, I'm going to use a small Synology NAS as an example. I do not have any important files stored in it, so I can do whatever testings I want. But in your case, because in this video, we are going to deal with networking, it may cause issues in your NAS. So be cautious and take your own risk if you want to proceed. Let me go to control panel for network interface. You can see I have 2 physical interfaces. I already configured the first interface. So in this video, let me use the second interface for our testing. Click on the interface, edit. You can see now it has static IP address assigned to it, and I do not have the enable VLAN checked. So that's why it works on the default network. That's why it will have this type of subnet according to my UniFi network setting. You can see for default network, I have this subnet, right? So let me see how I can create a Pi-hole Docker by using this particular Synology network interface. Let me go to container manager, go to project. I already created the project. So if you start from scratch, you can take my YAML configuration file as a reference. So let me go to the YAML configuration. You can see it's a very straightforward configuration. The only special thing I want to highlight is about the network. For network, I give it a name, default network. And for driver, as I mentioned, I use Macvlan. This part is important because basically I'm saying this network will use the parent device. Parent here means Synology. So I will use Synology's interface. Here I need to change it to Ethernet 1. As I mentioned, I have 2 physical interfaces. The first one, I already use it. So I want to use the second one. So that's why here I want to use Ethernet 1. In your case, you need to change accordingly. When it comes to network config, yes, for subnet, this is my default network subnet. For gateway, this is the UniFi gateway for default network. For IP range, I'm okay with this one. Then when it comes to the Pi-hole server itself, I simply use the standard latest image from Pi-hole. For the environment, I only specify the important ones to me. DNS mask listening, this is a crucial setting. Later we will talk about this. And here I directly specify the password in this way. By the way, this configuration file is just I use in this video to directly show you the example. It's not a good practice to hard code all the values, right? You need to adjust it accordingly in your environment if you want. For volume, I already created these folders in Synology so that this will work. Here for the Pi-hole service network setting, I will take reference of the previously defined default network. Here I specify the IP address. So let me change it to 1.6 just to avoid conflicting with the existing IP address from Synology. Okay, very straightforward. The only thing I want to highlight again is here I use Macvlan, refer to one single network interface, the physical network interface from Synology, which is Ethernet 1. Okay, save it. Then I want to build and start the project. Okay, it's started already. Okay, I launched browser. I used this IP address, which I specified in the YAML configuration file. Now you can see I can correctly access the Pi-hole web admin user interface. Then let me use the password which I hard-coded in the configuration file. Log in. Okay, I'm in. I have successfully logged on. So now we can validate whether this Pi-hole works or not. On the screen, in the left side, you can see 3 clients. They belong to the 3 different VLANs. So let me start from the default network client. I will use dig command. And here I specify the Pi-hole server's IP address as the DNS server. And I want to resolve x.com. Yes, it's successful and the server is exactly the one I want, right? So move on to VLAN 10. Use the exact same Pi-hole's IP address. You can see it's a timeout communication error. You may think maybe that's because you cannot communicate with the Pi-hole server from VLAN 10, right? No, it's not the reason. Let me ping the Pi-hole server from VLAN 10. See, I can ping it without problem. Pi-hole received the request, but simply drop it. From VLAN 20, let me do the same thing, the exact same command. The same effect as in VLAN 10. So the root cause for the failure in VLAN 10 and the VLAN 20 is due to this setting. From the right side Pi-hole admin user interface, go to settings. For DNS, you can see this interface setting. By default, it's allow local request only, which means Pi-hole will only support the request from default network. Why only default network? Because in the Docker configuration, we use the Synology's second physical network interface, and that interface is connected with default network. So that's why this Docker Pi-hole will only support requests from local network. To change the behavior, you can see here I have several other settings. If I change it to permit all, save it. Now from the VLAN 10 client, let me run the same dig command again. Yeah, this time it's successful. See the replies from this default network IP address from Pi-hole, right? From VLAN 20, the same result. So now you may think the solution is very simple, right? You simply change the Pi-hole configuration, then life is good. Not really. One of the main reasons people even use multiple VLANs is to secure their particular network or devices. To do that, people use firewall rules. For example, in the UniFi network controller, if I go to security, firewall rules, you can see now I have a grayed out firewall rule. This rule will simply drop all inter-VLAN traffic. Because now it's disabled, our 3 subnets, they can communicate with each other. But what if I simply enable this firewall rule? It is active, which means the 3 VLANs, they cannot communicate with each other anymore. Keep in mind, now in Pi-hole, we still have this permit all setting effective, right? So go back to the 3 VLANs for default network, run the same command, still works as expected. But from VLAN 10, run the same command, it hung there again. Later, it will time out. And from VLAN 20, the same result. Just by enabling this permit all setting, it doesn't really resolve the complete problem because we have firewall rules to make the other two VLANs communicate with default network with the Pi-hole IP address. You need more firewall rules. So in this video, I'm not going to discuss that option. If you are interested, you can check my previous video. The benefit of doing that is you do not need to change the dangerous network settings. You can use the default one interface network setting, then it will support multiple VLANs. But in this video, I'm going to discuss the approach which I prefer. What I want to achieve is within the Pi-hole Docker, I want to have multiple networks. Each network corresponds to one VLAN I want to support. So remember in the first scenario, when we configure the YAML file for the network within the Docker, we need to specify a parent device, right? Because here I want to have 3 networks, so I need to have 3 separate parent devices. In Synology, for each physical interface, by default, it only has one device. The problem we need to resolve is within Synology, we need to create multiple new network interfaces, each interface for a VLAN. That step is not related to Docker. It's completely done within the operating system for Synology. Before doing that, let me go to the control panel for Synology. For the existing network interface, for example, this LAN 2 interface, you can see I am able to specify a VLAN ID. For example, if I say 20 here, of course, I need to change the IP address and the gateway accordingly. But at the end, this interface will connect properly to that VLAN. But that's not enough. Once we make that change, this interface will only support one VLAN, right? We still cannot support multiple VLANs. This particular example NAS has only 2 physical interfaces. But you may know for other Synology NAS models, for example, the left one I'm showing you, if I go to network interfaces, you can see it has totally 6 physical interfaces. 2 of them are bonded together and the other 4 are free. They are available. So for example, I can choose 3 of them and configure them to connect to default network, VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. And then within Docker configuration, I can use this 3 reconfigured interface as the parent device, right? Of course, that's one way to do that. But what if I already used the interfaces for some purposes? I do not want to change the VLAN ID so that they are limited to those specific VLANs, right? Or what if for this right side example, we simply do not have enough physical network interfaces? How we can do that? So in this video, I want to explore an option, which is I use one and only one physical network interface to support multiple VLANs. Before proceeding, here I have to stress it again. What I'm going to talk about is very dangerous. If you do not do it properly, you may lose access to your NAS. Even if you can successfully do what you want, but later you want to revert to your original good and old Synology network configuration, you won't be able to do that. Even if you reset the DSM, it's still possible you cannot get back. So think about it, take it seriously, back up your data, only proceed if you want to take the risk. Do it at your own risks. Okay, what I'm going to change requires me to SSH into the backend of the Synology NAS. It cannot be supported by the standard admin UI and it's not recommended. Okay, I'm already in the SSH session. Let me go to etc folder, then go to sysconfig. For network configurations, it's within the network scripts. If I show the current files, you can see for each interface we see on the admin UI, we see a separate file because we want to change the second physical interface, which is Ethernet 1, right? So let me display the existing file, vi ifconfig Ethernet 1. Okay, the name is Ethernet 1. We see on the UI. Then it's static IP address, and we have this IP address configured with this network mask, right? I'm okay with this configuration because this will properly connect to the default network. So let me quit editing. We are ready to create the first file for VLAN 10. So I want to name the file as ethernet1.10. By the way, even though I'm using admin, it is still not root. So I need to use sudo to create a file in this folder. Okay, I want to say device equals to Ethernet 1.10, and for VLAN row device, I want to use that original physical device, Ethernet 1. For VLAN ID, this is for VLAN 10. On boot, yes, and boot protocol, static IP address. Let me use the VLAN 10 subnet IP address. Then network mask. Okay, I'm done with the editing for the VLAN 10 interface file. Oh, there's a typo here. Boot protocol. Yes, now it has correct spelling. Oh, here network mask. Okay, let me check the spelling again. Device, correct. VLAN row device, correct. VLAN ID, on boot, boot protocol, IP address, net mask. Okay, I'm good. Write it, quit. Then let me copy this file to VLAN 20 just as a template. Okay, then change the VLAN 20 file. Device name should be 20. VLAN row device the same. VLAN ID should be 20. The IP address should be in VLAN 20 subnet. Okay, I'm good. Save it. I have two new interface files for the two VLANs. They have the same physical device, which is Ethernet 1. Then to make the changes effective, I can either restart the NAS or I can simply run the command under etc rc.network, then restart. Run it. There are some errors. Let me check the current IP address situation. Okay, I have the correct Ethernet 1, Ethernet 1.10, 1.20. Okay, for the Ethernet 1 interface changes, I don't see problem. I believe the errors are related to my irrelevant changes to the first interface, so I can ignore them. Okay, so then let me go back to the web admin UI. Go to control panel, network, interface. That's the same effect as I saw previously when I prepared for this video. Because we manually changed the network configuration, the UI only correctly displayed the VLAN 10 and the VLAN 20 interfaces. See, we have the correct configuration, right? But we don't see the default network interface. In fact, let me go back to the SSH session. As I already showed you, we do have the correct IP address for the default network. I think this is just something we have to pay if we manually change the network configuration, right? So on the UI, it's not consistently reflecting our changes. But I'm good about the current situation. Now let's go back to the Docker. Let me create another Pi-hole Docker to use this three interfaces. You can see our previous Docker, it is still running. So let me stop it. Then go to project. I already created the multiple VLAN project. So let me show you this YAML configuration file. This file is very similar to the one we used in the first Docker. Difference is here in the networks section, I added two new networks. First, VLAN 10. Here I still use Macvlan, but the parent is the one we just created in the backend, right? Ethernet 1.10. Here I specify the correct subnet gateway. And for VLAN 20, similar situation. We use the new Ethernet 1.20. Then later, for Pi-hole Docker's networks, I added these two new networks accordingly, and I specify the proper static IP address for the two new VLANs, VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. Okay, so this is the simple changes to the YAML configuration. I'm good with the change. Let me save it, build and start the project. Okay, it's running without any error. Then let's go back to the Pi-hole web admin login. Okay, I'm in. And let me check the settings for DNS. See here, it has the default allow only local request setting. So we are good. Now let's go to the 3 VLAN clients to see whether they all work. Starting from the default network, use the old command. Okay, works as expected. Then for VLAN 10, the moment of truth. This time, I want to use this IP address. So this is the Pi-hole IP address for VLAN 10. Okay, it works. And the server name is the correct one we specified. Then for VLAN 20, so here I want to use the VLAN 20 Pi-hole IP address. Okay, it still works. By the way, if we check the UniFi network controller, this drop inter VLAN firewall rule is still active. So let me summarize what we did and what we achieved. So we went to the SSH for the Synology OS. We manually added 2 interfaces for VLAN 10, for VLAN 20. Then we composed a YAML file. We specified the 2 new networks accordingly by using the 2 interfaces from Synology. We didn't change anything in firewall rule. We didn't change anything in Pi-hole configuration. Then in all the 3 VLANs, the DNS resolving work automatically. Okay, as the final step to complete the configuration, for example, for VLAN 20, I need to go to UniFi network controller for networks, VLAN 20, go to the DHCP section. I need to modify the DNS server part, and here I want to use the Pi-hole's IP address in VLAN 20 as the DNS server. Okay, change it. Now let me go to the VLAN 20 client. I need to disconnect the network, connect again. Now it received the updated DHCP setting, including the new DNS, right? This time, when I run the dig command, I don't need to specify the DNS server because by default, it should use the Pi-hole as the DNS server. Let me try it, digx.com. Okay, it not only returned the result, but also the server is the Pi-hole server. In this way, we completed all the needed configurations. Okay, this is the end of the video. Thanks for watching.